Alright, and we are now live. Hello everyone, today I'm going to be doing a brief overview on how I made this scale formation effect, and afterwards I'll be doing a little bit of work on my particle system that I made using Blender's geometry nodes. For this I'm using Blender 4.1, so if you're using the current version of Blender, you should be good. So the way I made this, it's very, well, I shouldn't say very simple, it's rather simple. It's not a huge setup, but it's moderately sized. So, I guess, how should I describe this best? So basically, the logic behind this setup is that we have a ton of distributed points, and then we even them out like this, and then we instance the scales on top of them. So let me visualize this a little bit better so that we don't see the scales. So let me have this, but here we can see that the point clouds are working against us, so I'm going to use a set radius node to make them quite a bit smaller. There we go. Yeah, that seems to be alright. So first thing that we do, I'm not going to worry about the size right there for the time being, but I make a ton of points right here. Here, let me go and connect this to the output. Oh, by the way, this file is up on Gumroad for free, if you want to go and just check it out for yourself, play around with it. But here's the basic concept. We have a ton of points scattered on a mesh, and then we go and distribute them evenly. Which that part is actually rather simple. You can see the entire setup right here. We take the index of nearest, get the position from there, subtract the current position by the neighbor's position, like this. We scale it by 0.1, that's what I found works the best. Even normalizing and setting it as a set distance didn't work as well as just taking the current length to the neighbor or the current offset to the neighbor and then offsetting it by 0.1 in this case. Unfortunately, it does need 40 iterations, so I wouldn't recommend doing this on something too big. You could determine what accuracy you do want. There's probably better point distribution algorithms, but I was just like, I'm just going to try this out and make it really quickly. And then for every step in the repeat zone, we snap it to the original mesh's surface. Again, just a simple, put that into the position input, and then you're good. That's that part. The more complicated part is getting the data for the rotations, and then making the density be affected by the face area. So let's go over that part. So here I store the face area. I multiply it by 100 just because when I was looking at the viewer, if we take a look at this for the face area, we can see that that looks pretty good. But if I were to mute the multiply node, we can see that there's banding, and I was a little bit worried that it might be a float point precision error, either in the viewer or actually in the node. So I just multiplied it by 100 just in case. But that shouldn't really be all too necessary. I just wanted it to look good for what we do next. I blurred it a little bit. You can change up and down the blurring amount. And then I store that as a named attribute. Pretty simple. And then what I do is remap the size. We get the average. Or wait, maybe I should have used the max instead of the mean there. That might be a good idea. It's probably fine. Well, actually, I need to test that. We basically take the size and then we compare that to the average size so that we can map the density factor to be within that range. If I turn this off, I'm going to change this to be the max just in case. Okay. Alright, so I may need to update the file that's currently on Gumroad. Because, that makes sense. Okay, so I did something a little bit wrong here. I accidentally put in the mean instead of the max. So this makes it a little easier, less, like, the end result is the same. Actually, is it? Over here, we're not getting the same thing. I'm just gonna test really quickly. Like, this should be... Like, 20,000 was the density before. That seems to be alright. Let's compare the two. I'm just gonna do a little bit of live debugging at the moment. Because if this is the mean, then that means there will be some scales that are above the density factor that I wanted, so it might not work all too well. Well, it should be fine either way. I'm just going to leave it as the mean for the time being, but just keep that in mind. Alright, and then we move this over to here, and then we transfer the live information. So after the points get relaxed when they get pushed around into where they're supposed to be, we then send it off to get its... then we go and instance the scales on those points. But to do that, we need a good rotation for those points. So for that, I use the normal for just the general direction. Here, I can show you that. Normal, off, and on. But then we need a good orientation, because by default, we just get an orientation that's kind of arbitrary. I think it's the z-axis that it chooses. But we want this to be aligned to the UV tangent, so that we can art direct it. So, fortunately, I made my own version of the UV tangent node. This should be available in the setup that's up for free on Gumroad, but if you want to look at the internals, this is it. Again, this is a node group so that you make it once and then you never have to look at it again. I hope we can get a version of this that's in Blender by default, because Blender does use UV tangents quite in several instances. Yeah, I forget. There's the distribute points on curve node, which I assume uses the UV tangents. And then basically whenever, well, in the shader editor, they have a UV tangent node. So I wish we could get that same stuff in Blender by default, but since the developers don't have time for that, we have to make it ourselves. So that's how you would do that. And then we shoot that over to there, and then we get the size info. And then we shoot that over to there, and then we scale it by 3. Because if I were to not multiply the size by 100, I would need to multiply this by 300. And just so that we don't need to worry about float point precision errors. If that were an issue, I really don't think it is, but that banding is making me a little suspicious of it. Let me use the... oh wait, we don't have the text viewer. I was viewing the actual numbers when I was making part of this in 4.1, and the numbers seemed to be alright. They didn't seem to be clipping at all, but I didn't want to run that risk at all. But that's how you do that. Again, here's the scale. And the scales here, you can make it whatever you want. In this case, it's just this object. Nothing too fancy. Just, I mirrored it, subdivided it. Ooh, I subdivided it twice. That is less than recommended. Oh, actually, wait. I guess, you could lower it if you want. But yeah, and I did leave the rest of the body in here, the test body object. And we can see that the density is really affecting the finger part here, which is why I should test the max part here once more. Nope, leads to pretty much the same thing. We can see that the gradient seems to be just a wee bit more even. Let me set this to be like 2000. Okay, very, very interesting. So it was an accident that I had the mean be the input by the default. I think I just accidentally put in one instead of the other, but it seems to be giving better results than the max would. Interesting. Should that be the min? Let's just test everything. Okay, so min, let's plug that into there. Interesting. I think that's undoing what I want to do. Because that's doing something like that. Oh well. Well, anyway, you could experiment with that, see what works with the models that you want to play around with. But yeah, this could be used for dragon scales and stuff like that. It probably could be improved. It's just a little project I made in like an hour. But yeah, cool stuff. I guess now that we're at 10 minutes so far, I think I'll go and play around with my particle system again, because I need to make a smoke example with that. But yeah, any questions, please put them in the chat before we move on. And also, I like the texture that I made for it. looks kind of, I don't know, reminds me of the outside of a clam, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's that. Yeah, and it with lighting. I wasn't sure whether to render it or to leave it as the solid view for the original post, so I was just like, I'll put out the solid view, and then once I figure out the shading and make it pretty, I can post that later. But yeah, look at that. That looks pretty good. This was obviously based off the Aquaman suit from the movies, and today there was a video on Tested about how they made the suit. And it turns out they hand-placed every single scale, which is an incredible feat. That's a lot of work. And apparently they had to do it like over 7 times, I believe, relaying out the scales all the time. This method was just an experiment, but if you want a really art-directed version, it would be, oh yeah, we're just gonna hand-place all of them, if you have the time for that. If you have months to make a physical suit. But this was just a little test. Actually, speaking of testing, let's use an actual test mesh for this. I think I will regret that decision because as we can see, the density is way too high. And, oh wait, no, that's a face area problem. I should put some safeguards into this, shouldn't I? Okay. Yeah, maybe I should have done that first. Okay, let's set this to be 2. So we can see here, for some reason, the scales are way... The face area is way too big. Interesting. That's why we always do the debugging live. But again, I made this project in an hour. So let me just subdivide by 2 times, just so that we get some nice stuff happening there. We can bump this up. So we can see the scales are now looking pretty good. Even though right there it's looking a little funky, but it should be fine. Actually, yeah, why is that part so big? Like, the density is determined by the face area for a general location. So if I blur this more, then we should see it starts to even out a little bit more. I am still surprised that that happens. And then the UV map determines where the scales are going, which looks pretty good. Uh-oh. Oh, yeah, the stream's lagging because I exploded everything. Alright. But yeah, there you go. Ideally the scale would be a little bit more even, but at this point it's fine. Like, the relaxing algorithm kind of takes the density into account, but not enough where the actual scale is accurate. If I spent more time on this, I would make a better relax points node that could take the radius of the particle into account, but it's not too necessary. But yeah, cool stuff. Let's see. Let me check the thing. Is there a way to align instances evenly across a grid? Yes, there should be. Like, you could go and subdivide a plane to make a grid, or you could use the grid primitive. So grid, wait, where's that? Okay. Let's use a instance on points. Let's just have this be a cube. There we go. So here you can make like a ton of instances in a grid. And you could just change the scale and all that, and it works quite well. Alright. Shiny. Wow. This almost looks like feathers, which oddly enough, I did make a setup very similar to this. That is basically just feathers. It's the same concept, I guess. Take a lot of objects with varying scales and such. Scales. Pun intended. And then evenly distribute them across a mesh with good spacing. Even though with the feathers, I don't think I had even spacing on them. Yeah, wow. It's interesting how that looks. But yeah, eventually, one of these days, I'm going to make one with a better distribution algorithm that takes the actual scale into account, so that these gaps don't exist, and up here, they're not too packed. But yeah, that is the thing at the moment, and we can see just look how even that is. Very nice. Okay, so that's that part. And now we are going to switch over to my particle system because I need to make a smoke example. Because I've been putting that off for too long. It'll be a shorter stream today, just because I have stuff to do. Alright, let's go and boot up the particle system. The particle system is also up on Gumroad for free currently. So if you want to take a look at that, feel free. Alright, so here's the particle system. This one does take the radius into account when it makes the particles not collide with each other. But doing it for a lot of particles that are very, very densely packed is rather difficult to do. At least difficult to do well. So I didn't use the complicated version. But with this version, like, that's the algorithm for that, which uses kind of substepping, kind of not. Multiple iterations, not substepping. If I wanted to make an actual system with substepping, I could, but it would probably be slow because I would have to take the velocity of all the colliders into account, or just its old position and its current position, mixing between the two, and there's a lot to go over when doing simulation stuff. It is not fun. But yeah, there's that. And I have the crystal example, which I recently updated the file to make sure that bloom was enabled because I forgot to include that last time. Here, let's switch the HDRI to something a little... There we go. But now I need to make a version that is just smoke. So I have a particle in here. Did I forget to... There's the spark particle that should be in the instanced objects one. Alright. There's the sparkle, okay. So we have the sparkle right there. It's invisible because of the shader stuff. But if I can manipulate that a little bit, I can make a smoke particle. So let me go and move it over to here, and it'll be smoke... Whoop. Smoke particle. There we go. Can't spell for the life of me at the moment. Maybe I should name that sparkle particle. Yeah. Just for a little bit clearer naming. So smoke particle, let's go and edit that shader. And let's also make another simulation that will showcase it quite well. So here, I'll just have a plane. I'll put it in a new collection. It'll just be smoke. Oh. Yeah, smoke should be fine. For some reason, I think it's because it's cold in my room right now, but my hands do not want to type. Okay, this will be smoke sim, or no, sim smoke. Caps lock. Alright. Now let's go into the geometry node editor, click new, and now let's go and add in our simulation. So simulation zone. Now, I do eventually want to make just one node that will be a particle system, but that's a bit out of Geometry Nodes' wheelhouse at the moment. Geometry Nodes, it's in a weird state where there's low-level stuff, there's high-level stuff, and I'm making high-level stuff, but I can't get too high-level because we don't have the technology to do some of that stuff yet. So it's a weird mix between all of it. So let's use points. Put that in there. And I need a set particle info node, one of the nodes that I made, so that we can set the lifetime, the mass, the size, random seed. That one I still need to think about. The velocity, the initial velocity, and all that. And also the rotations there, even though that's still very much experimental. Then for here, we just need the particle solver. There we go. And we should see, if I add in some gravity, we should see... Oh wait, I need to actually connect this. We should see that particles are now falling, which is pretty good. One particle is being added per frame, which is, you know, not what we want, so I'll change that later. But then afterwards, we need to instance on particles, instance, or we could just instance on points. But I did make an instance on particles node, which is just instance on points, plus. So here we can see that we can pick whatever object we want. In this case, it'll be smoke particle without needing an outside thing. Uh-oh, what's happening here? Oh no, smoke particle. There we go. So now we should see that this is our smoke particle. And yeah, it's looking rather funny. Because the random seed is set to 0 and it's not being updated per frame, let's set that to be frame-based. As we can see, now it's doing a random pattern because of the shader. And then I need an align instances to camera node. And since the active camera node is not really that great, we need to put in the camera manually. I think that was because I planned for this to be a 4.0 thing, but then I was like, this probably won't be ready before 4.1 is out, so I just did that. Okay, let me read the chat real quick. It has nothing to do with what you're doing now, but I want to know if you work in a studio or freelance. I used to freelance. But then I got hired, and it has been... freelance is okay, but having a regular studio job is better, because you don't need to worry about constantly getting clients. It's less of a headache, because you know what you're going to be working on for like months at a time. Alright. Now that we have this, I think I want to turn gravity off for the smoke. Maybe we want it to rise, just by a little bit. And, we can also use the velocity edit node that I made, so that we can add in a little bit of drag. I was unsure whether I wanted to add in the scale factor into here, but I'm viewing this as kind of the set position node, where we can either set the velocity or offset it. In this case, we want just the velocity to go in there. Alright. Maybe I should rename that to velocity. Velocity. Yeah, that would be good. So I'm going to make it go up by a little bit. There we go. So that'll look like smoke. And we can add in noise. There's options to put in more forces based off that. So I'll use a noise texture, do this, scale it down, and this is just so that you don't need more add nodes, just to compress it by a little bit more. I'm still unsure about a few of the design choices in this, but it should be fine. Interesting, that's all taking pretty much the same path. Ah, there we go. And that's also because the position that these are spawning from is not randomized. I can do this just to make the spawn point a little bit more varied. Make it 0.1. 0.2. Yeah, that should be fine. There we go. There we have it. Now we have a ton of particles spawning in, and they're going all over the place. Let's make it a bit more general. Maybe tone it down by a bit. Just so that... yeah, that seems to be good. And now that we have that set up... again, I should make a bundle node where all that could just work without the user having to set up everything, where even the simulation zone is in there. That could be, I don't know, and then just have like checkboxes for align instances to camera. It would be a big node with tons of drop-downs, but it could be cool. It would be as big as the original particle system, which, as we can see, is huge. And also, well, no, it would be bigger because we don't have nested drop-downs like in the original system, which is unfortunate. Alright, so now that we have that, let's go and edit our smoke particle. Let's go into the shader editor. Let's go and duplicate it. Let's just make this smoke and caps. There we go. So I want to redo a majority of this, but actually, pretty much all of it, almost. But, yeah. Almost all of it, not completely. Just going to take that, chop out most of that. Put that there, we don't need you. Yeah, basically just the fade, and then putting that into the emission. Should be good. We just chop out a majority of that, but we still have that going. Set this to multiply. Or it could be add, either or. Okay, so here we should... oh, wait. I need to get the gradient from the center. Okay. So we have the noise here. I should set this to like 1000 so that we can get a really random number or random texture per thing. So we can have that. Let me set this to be a gray, maybe make it a little bit faded. Now, unfortunately, in Blender, we don't have the pixel depth offset. So whenever these things are hitting the ground or anything like that, it'll have a very harsh cutoff, which I'm not the biggest fan of. Let's get the distance. Oh wait, vector math distance, not displacement. There we go. Now, is this centered? It is. Okay, so we could just use the length, and that'll be even simpler. Very nice. Okay, so we can do that. I can use a map range to get the distance from there. So I'll do that, and then we'll put in the noise here as well. So I will unnormalize that, use a multiply. So we should see that's working, and then we just need to invert this. So now we can get a very nice noisy gradient. This will need work, but for the time being, it's not too bad. Let's do something like that. Take a look at the output once we fix all of this. So here we should see that it is fading over time. Okay, that's good. And we should make it so that the noise evolves over its life. Or age or life? I think age. Yeah, that's how it should be done. So let's get the age attributes. Multiply it by a bit. Vector math multiply. There we go. Ah, that's a little bit too fast. So let's slow it down. Or actually, wait, no, we want to just divide it by a lot. So let's set that to be something like this. Just enough so that we can see it. Why is it glitching out? This might be a little hard to see. Well, let's take a look at this one right here. Okay, let me go into the actual particle system and make it so that it doesn't rise up at all. Just so that I can see what's happening. Oh, yeah, that's moving way too fast. Let's go into the shader editor. Let's see. I need to select that particle again. So let's divide this by like 40 and see what's going on. Okay. Ah, so the noise is making that kind of interesting. So the detail being that high up makes it a little bit worse. Let's do that. Yeah, it makes it so that we see a lot of change very quickly before we see the large changes. Okay. So let's set this to be like 200 or 50 maybe? 150. Alright. It's still not great. I wish I could make a better texture for that, which I can actually. Let's use a separate color, set it to be hue, saturation, and value. Let's use a ping pong node. I'm not sure how good this will look, but it'll give us a different, or, no, it's saturation, isn't it? And we don't ping pong that. And we want to normalize it. Okay. That might give us a more of a smoke-like vibe to this. Let's take a look at the output. That, okay, that feels a little bit more smoky. Then we can turn this up by a bit. Just a tad more smoky. And then I should set this to be smoother steps so that we get a much more eased gradient. I should have researched how games make them look so good. But we're on the clock. Alright. I think I should make it so that the age value adds to the smoke so that it gets smaller instead of just fading out of existence. So if I do this... Oh, okay. So if we do that, so that starts off normal and then it shrinks over time. Okay, that's... It's still very much not great. 100... Okay. And then the gradients just need to be a little less dense. There we go. Okay. Still not great, especially because of the animation that I have running on it, but it will be. It will be. I can see where it's headed. So geometry node editor, once again, let's go over here. Oh, it looks like the age parameter is killing it way too early, so I can fix that. Let's set this to be extremely general, like 0.05, or extremely weak in the sense. And then we can add back in the go up. Okay, that's a little, like, just a little bit better. Okay. Or maybe I should have set this to have random velocity instead of a random offset. That's a little bit better. I'm going to scale this. I'll set it to 1 and -1. Except for the z-axis because I don't want it to go through the floor. And I'll set this to 0.1 so that we can have a much more generalized, a easier to use control. Alright, I can set that so that we have even more particles spawning in per frame. Just really crank it up. Particle size is still even for all of them, which isn't the best idea. But for now, it's like, okay, good enough. Now for the particle scale, yeah, let's make it random. So let's set this to be a float. It'll do an automatic conversion. There we go. That's looking a lot more like smoke or steam in this case. It's looking pretty good. And again, these are aligned towards the camera. So if we do something like this, it'll look like it's 3D, which is really cool. But only where the camera is. Just orient that a bit better. Yeah, there we go. There we go, that's a bit better. Let me set that to be a different value. Okay, that's good. Alright. Is this the tutorial from the Aquaman short? Yeah, just a little breakdown. I made that setup in an hour, so it's not too great, but it is available, and it's also available up on Gumroad for free. It's just like how someone could learn something from it. Apparently it is... I did not expect the effect to be as popular as it is. It has gotten a lot of likes. I think like 1,000 in the first hour, which is a bit better than usual. Alright, so that's okay. That's decent. Well, it could be better. Hey, do you work for Marvel or for a big company? Yes. Not Marvel. Let's see, that's with a bit more noise, and that... I don't know, that's looking alright. I want it to be fully disappeared before it actually dies, but not a moment before. So here we should see that those are dying, and that this is visible up until the point of death. There we go. I often reference Marvel, or the VFX studios that make Marvel movies, their breakdowns for the TV shows and movies that they work on, so like Loki, Infinity War, Endgame. I reference all of those because it's very interesting to see how they made the effects, and also how much of that is possible in Blender. Because the Infinity War snap effect, well, I remade that in Blender, and it was using another custom particle system that was somewhat similar to this, but not exactly. But it's just interesting how, what can be done in Blender and stuff that doesn't necessarily need, Houdini, which is really funny. Like, I've mentioned quite a bit how Blender is very much, it's not going to be the Houdini killer anytime soon. It'll be a long time before Blender gets to that level. But we could do a good amount, at least if you really know what you're doing. Because, yeah. Let's see, let's use the random value. I want to randomly affect the drag. Because with geometry nodes, a lot of stuff needs to be made yourself, because you have quite a few low-level nodes here, and there's high-level nodes from the old, before they kind of switched gears to be, oh, let's make everything a node group. But if you know what you're doing, you can do quite a bit. Which, when I hit the limits for stuff like, oh, I need these particles to find out what their neighbors are, and you can only get one neighbor because of the built-in node, it's like, okay, how do I build a KD tree? That's something in the code that they have, but we don't have access to that, which is limiting quite a bit of my stuff, especially with particle systems. It would be really nice to have a good KD tree node inside of GeoNodes, but that is for the future. All right, that's looking pretty good. I would say it's looking like standard particle smoke, which is the goal in this case. We just want very standard smoke. I'll just make the sim smoke. There we go. How many years have you worked on Blender? I think I started when I was around 13 years old. I'm 21 now. So that's around 8 years, but I didn't do Blender all the time. 2020 was when I really focused on learning Blender, because that's when I graduated, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do for work? And it was like, well, let's keep doing this Blender stuff and see what happens. It was a little hobby back in the day, but then I turned it into my career, and I got hired. I worked on a game, which was really good. And then I did freelance for a bit, and now I'm hired by some big companies, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. Since Blender has become a lot more popular, it's gone mainstream. I was talking about this with some friends earlier. It means mass adoption by professionals, which is really, really cool. Even movie companies are using Blender sometimes. Like, there was one movie that, I'm forgetting the name, but it was made in Blender. It was like a Netflix movie, I forget what. But that happened, it was pretty much entirely in Blender. But even Spider-Verse used the grease pencil system for the spiderweb lines and the line art in there. So it is very much becoming more and more popular and more powerful. I'm hoping to push it even further with its power, because like here we have to work pretty hard to get basic particle systems, because the developers gave us the one building block, which is simply getting the previous frame's data, and then the index of nearest node. That was all that came in 3.6, which was the big simulation nodes update, and it was 2 nodes. But even with that little bit, the people who are very experienced in this kind of stuff just took it very far with only 2, like, nodes. So, it's not bad. But it would be better if we had a KD tree. Simulation nodes are really cool, but my PC is too weak to make something like this. Do you have something simulation nodes related for my weak PC? I would say quite a bit of this can be done even on lower end PCs. The only particle-to-particle interactions and particle-to-mesh interactions are still very much... Those are the expensive things. Not only because like particles have to evaluate a lot of other particles. The index of nearest node does use the KD tree, but I need to run it quite a few times for it to realize what other particles are in the area, because we only have access to one index, not all of them. And so it's a KD tree, but it's severely limited. And then interacting with meshes and stuff. I haven't researched in the source code how Blender's old particle system would make that function, but if I did figure it out, I could probably make it a little bit faster, because this system, the original particle system, is about 10 times faster than this current one. But here we get the ability to have particles where we can spawn in child particles that can do whatever we want, like this. You want to do this in the old particle system? Well, have fun. And stuff where, oh, I want the particles to spawn on a curve. It's like, how do I do that in the old system? It's like, well, I'm not too sure about that. So that's the goal of the geometry nodes-based systems. To make particles, to make basically, instead of the devs having to code in a better particle system every time we needed more functionality, we can customize it fully, and then put it up on Gumroad for other people to get. Basically add-ons, but more accessible and on steroids. Because it would be really annoying if add-on developers had to recreate every single node from scratch, every individual one. Because who on earth wants to go and create a, I don't know, which one was it? You know, like collection nodes, object nodes. It's good to have geometry nodes as a base, and then people who don't want to worry about syntax errors could go in and just string these along, just worrying about the functionality, and then they can make stuff, which is really cool. I also want to make a part of the smoke that is, I want to make an explosion eventually, but this smoke I need to make look good before then. So let's go into the shader editor once more. We are at 42 minutes at the moment, so we have 18 minutes left. So I'll just go and change a little bit of this. Like, I could make it so that the smoke scales up over time. It's not actually scaling, it's disappearing. The noise is being kind of faded out according to the spherical gradients, which is pretty good. I could increase the harshness of it, but that makes it even more noisy, and we don't want that. The distortion, I think, could look good potentially. I'm not too sure about that. Yeah, no, I think a scale 2 is the best for now. Then with the hue, I could use a ping pong, then plug that in there. Like, that gives a very weird, kind of sharp feel to it, which I'm not the biggest fan of. Do this, that makes it look even worse. But yeah, or you could use an actual flipbook, which I would recommend. What programs do you use besides Blender? Unreal, a little bit of Houdini, a little bit of Unity. And I'm forgetting the others, but I dabble quite a bit. The next programs on my kind of dabbling list is ZBrush and the... It's not Cozy Blanket, it's Sparsal sculpting program made by a former Blender developer. It's GPU accelerated, so it'll be like Blender, but well, I'm assuming it has to be GPU accelerated. What am I talking about? So I'll actually be able to sculpt using millions of polygons versus in Blender, where if you have 1 million, it really freaks out. But yeah, that's that. So I could go and try to add emission for parts of this. I could mix between the emissive side and the other stuff. But maybe I should make another particle for that, potentially. Let's get the newer mix node, in this case a float. Okay, and we can mix between two versions of this. So I can make it so that... Oh wait, no, I'm just gonna copy this. So we'll branch off the noise effector. It'll be more like that. Probably should have made it so that that's evened out. So that'll be like this. And then the only thing we have to really affect is the top part right here. So it won't be clamped too much. Does it? No, it has to be clamped. I just don't want those borders to be visible. So no, wait, yeah, it does have to be in the negative. Just so that the gradient is nice and even. I still want it to look good. Yeah, that should be fine. Maybe 0.2. I don't like clipping when it comes to the textures. Do you consider yourself as a VFX artist or a 3D artist? 3D artist. I very rarely do video effects, just because I don't have the best camera, and it's just a little annoying to... Actually, wait a second. I don't need the H2 factor into that because I'm going to be switching between the different values. So it'd be like that, and then we just really clamp down on this. Or I don't even need the map range in there, it could just be this one. So it starts off with the emission set to... Oh, dang it. Okay, I'll need to multiply the mask by quite a bit instead of just switching between it plainly. There we go. So something more like that. Then we just swap the colors as well. Little quirks of all this. But yeah, 3D artist, procedural tech artist, something along those lines. Because what I usually get hired to do is to make procedural setups, and it works out quite well. Let's see. Oh, that's looking cool, but not what I want. So that emission... Oh, dang it. Looks like I will need to... Okay. Interesting stuff. Okay, let me try to make this a bit better. So I'll need to use the gradient thing again. I was hoping to avoid this, but it looks like I need to. Need to keep the other gradient into account. But instead of doing that, it needs to be inverted. For both of these, like that, and then wait a second, I need to make sure that those are swapped. There's a short key, there's a hotkey for that, but I forgot. It might have changed in 4.0, not sure. So if we do this... Oh, that's... Okay, why does that do that? Wait, something's not right. No, it seems like it's okay. Anyway, the goal is for that to spawn in and be a little bit harsh like that, and then it fades out. I probably should use a power node so that the fall-off is a little bit better. It's been a while since I've done smoke effects, so I'm just doing it again. So wait, no, we don't want that. We want it to be lower. Let's do... Okay, there's something there. No, I'm still... I'm missing something very obvious at the moment. I'm currently a little bit distracted. Alright, let's try to rebase this. So the regular Steam section is just that. We don't need that part anymore. Maybe we still do. We just want the bright parts to fade. So we just take that gradient and then multiply it. Or you know what? I should just, instead of having to do the weird mixing thing, I should just go and have an add shader so that I can add a different emission texture to it. That'll make it easier if I want to separate it into its own effect, which would be better. Alright, so something like that. Map range so that it's in the area I want, and then I can use a power node to affect the fall off, and then a multiply to affect the strength. So with this one, we want it to be orange. There we go. And then we want this to be high, that to be low. Multiply that by quite a bit. There we go. That's a little bit better. Still not quite what I want, but we're getting there. My brain was just not cooperating all too much. But we're getting there. We are. Like, ideally, the fire would be a separate particle pass. It wouldn't be joined to the smoke. But I could do that, but I don't know. Like, this looks okay. But this fall-off should definitely be a lot more harsh. Ooh. Even though that does look pretty cool. Yeah, when I figure this out, it will be a part of the particle system by default. Ooh, that's actually looking okay. Still not great, but okay. Like, the particles should be a lot bigger. Or yeah, no, the particles should scale up over time. Oh no, wait, that's what I'm missing. I forgot. Maybe I should make another shader to experiment on. Like, the particles should be getting bigger over time, and then they should fade out to make it look like it's actually dissipating. That's what should happen. I'll set that to 0, that to 1, and then I just affect this part. There we go. 2. I should do the same for the one up here. Just make the range what I want, and then affect the defaults right here. So if it's clipping, we just move the clipping in, and I just set the range to be that. Strengths affected there, that's okay. Finally, a Cartesian caramel particle system tools kit. Yep, that's the goal. Basically, a setup where you don't have to go through all the headache that I did. That's the goal. Just a setup that you can learn from or use in your projects that you don't need to go inside and have to fiddle around with. Oh, how do I make particle-to-particle collisions? Let me look up how to make a system like that on YouTube. Like, it hasn't been all too bad, except for, well, the particle-to-mesh collisions have been deceptively simple. That, like, they look like they should be simple, even though they're complex, because you have to deal with, oh, if the particle has a scale of 0, it should be a raycast method. But if the particle has a radius, then it has to use a stepped almost Verlet method. And then you have to switch between the two. I still don't have a good version of the raycast collision, because just technical reasons. Like, in one case with the raycast collisions, I'll just showcase this very quickly. I should save this in its current state. So with this one, we can see that the speed looks almost alright, but it speeds up a little bit when it exits. That's just because of the way the collisions work. It's so close to being good, but it's not quite, and this uses 5 raycasts, which isn't great. This one is another raycast collider, which is the current good method, even though it's technically version 1. But the problem is, when it hits, it technically goes through 2 offsets when it should be just 1. But that makes it so that it doesn't collide with the mesh like more times than it should, which would slow it down, at least with the offset. And that's a weird quirk of raycast physics where it's like, oh, you offset, then the gravity is an issue, then you have to raycast to make sure that you're not clipping through the mesh again, and so on. It's a lot of annoying stuff. But now that I got it mostly working, I'm okay with putting this out on Gumroad for free. Okay, let's go back to the smoke particle right here. Let me save this. Now, the smoke is still not how I want it to look, because the texture is just a little bit off. I'm not sure if that's like the smoke can't be black because, ooh, that looks pretty good. Scale should be bigger, it should be a bit more varied. The fall off isn't great. Like it being closer to 10 should be alright. I don't know. Should I use my fancy light fall off method? I do have a node for that, but the sparkle particle has it in there already. Let's put this in here and just let's just see how it looks. Then to multiply. Like that just looks better for the fire. Fall off looks a bit more crisp. But the slight problem with this one is that it kind of plateaus and then it gets really bright. Well, I just like the ethereal fall off there. Which is pretty good. Pretty good in my opinion. So I could make that even more broad and then just reel it back a bit. I'll set that to be 0.1. Yeah, I'll keep that for the fire. Just a little bit better. Oh, that's... Like technically, there should be a minimum, but I'm using the smoother step to avoid that. Here, I could just do this, get rid of that one right there. Has to be 0.999 because if it's 1, we should see that it'll go and clip like that, which we don't want. So if we do that, it will just stay bright. Smoke in real life is a dark color. Yep. That is correct. Ooh, that's looking cool. Like, the fall-off makes it kind of, like, semi-simulates how it would look in a volume. Kind of, not quite. Like, I've tried other methods, like actually having, a correct exponential curve and stuff like that, but this is what I've found looks the best. That or dividing by 0.0001, but that inverts the gradient, so having a logarithm is the better method because you don't have to reinvert it and so on. Like it feels hacky, especially having the 0.999 there, but it's what I found works the best. Makes it feel volumetric, which is what I want. Actually, let's try it for the actual smoke, just to, like, it doesn't work well with higher values. As we can see, yeah, it's not looking that great with high values. I did want to just try it out. 0.6. Like if I lower it by a bit, yeah, no, that basically is useless. But that looks okay. It looks alright. I think the detail might be too high. That might be the problem. Let me use a power node instead. A power node is good for fall-offs. To make them a little more eased. Just to make them feel a little bit softer. Okay, that is actually alright. Still a bit too strong, so I could go and tone that down by a bit. Doesn't look bad, but could always be better. I should do research on how games usually do it. They probably use, I'm assuming, flipbooks with actual smoke simulation puffs. But here, for procedural textures, it's not too bad. Not too bad. Let's change, yeah, it's looking alright. But it's looking the best with the orange tone. Like, the one thing I'm worried about is in here it actually looks like particles, you can see which particles are going out, and then they kind of just fade. But it's alright. Are you still experimenting with the grass animation? A little bit, not too much, because I basically did everything I wanted to with that. Oh, looks like it's clipping on the sides right there, so let's go and fix that. That's why the particles, like the billboards, have to be so big, because the clipping can get a little bit out of hand. Let's just tone it back to where we can't see that. But then the fire part is very overwhelming, so I need to tone that down by quite a bit as well. Maybe just the gradient side. Like we tone that down to be like 0.7. Should be okay. Actually, wait a second. That's interesting. Yeah, I should try the... Oh, the smoke is scaling up over time as well. Just whatever feels right with this setup. Like 0.5 should be the correct thing because of the length, but that's offset just a little bit by the noise. Here, let's make it so that the particles can delete. Just want it so that they're just barely visible by the time they kick the bucket. What's the background music? It's very smoothing. It's music from The Legend of Zelda. I believe Breath of the Wild in this case. Okay. So for making smoke that actually turns darker over time, I would need to use a mix shader instead of a transparent shader. So that it actually switches to the dark version. So I could do that, but instead of plugging that into the strength, it would be into a mix shader like this. So if we view this now, there we go. We can see very... Oh, that actually looks good. Oh, here, let me turn off the grid so that's not making it look weird. Wow, that's very... Wow. Looks a little cartoony because of the fall off. Oh, that's cool. It actually looks not bad. It's very chunky smoke. Huh. Interesting. Now let me bump this up by a bit. We can see that it is clipping on the sides, but I can fix that. Just tone it down by a bit, then when it's at the top, it will go down before it actually eliminates. Look at that's not too bad. Like, how does it look from the camera? Well, actually, it's funny that from the camera's perspective, it looks a lot more like just cards rather than actual smoke. That's funny. Actually, that's not too bad. Here, let's just keep playing with it until it feels right. I could turn up the noise frequency, but that doesn't look better. That looks worse. So 2 seems to be good enough for now. And then for here, we put that... Was that a mistake? Yes, it was. Apparently having an add shader and a mix shader is a very bad combination. Oh no, wait, that's because I, for some reason, took out the transparency. And nope, we want to flip that around once again. So that is on the bottom. Oh, that's what I missed. Okay, so it with the fire looks not too great. I thought the fall off would look okay even with that. Yeah, that doesn't look all too great, being honest. I think I would need a bump node in order to, or maybe just shifting the noise texture down by a little bit. Here, let me try something a little bit funky. We are past 1 hour, so I will be wrapping up the stream soon. Very, very soon. So let's just give this a try. Let's see if this works. So here, if I do this, or no, I want to shift it down by a little bit. Then if I take the difference, yes. Oh wait, where's difference? Difference. There we go. We might be able to get something that feels like. Oh, is it working? Oh, it feels like it's almost working. Something that looks like the smoke is inhibiting it from showing by just a little bit. Like here, if we set this to be that, we can see that if it's 0, that happens, but it's kind of, it's like how the bump node works. Just a more manual way of making it. I'm overcomplicating it by quite a bit. But, wait, what if I set that to 1? Yeah, no, that doesn't look good. Maybe the distance needs to be more. Experimenting, let's see what works. Yeah, no, that doesn't look good at all. Okay, that means we need to use less nodes, so yay! You'll never complain about having to use less nodes. 200. I do like the thick smoke more than the just kind of vapor smoke, but when I add in the flame, it doesn't look nearly as good, which I'm saddened by. Like when I do that, it looks a little bit better, but not by much. Maybe I should add in the noise to it again, because right now it's looking, you know, not the best. I could make it so that the noise is randomized for every single particle in there, but that might not be a good idea because we want it to look a little more cohesive. Here, let's run it again. That's a little bit too much. 0.2 should be enough. The camera's perspective. Yeah, no, that's not looking good. Not looking good at all. Let's set it to 3 just so that we have a general wave. I don't know, do I just take out the emissive part? Because without it, if we just look at this, like that looks pretty, well, It looks like dust bunnies the higher it goes, which I'm not the happiest about. Let's set the animation to be a bit faster. Okay. So that looks just a tad too fast, so I could slow it down. But we're still very much getting that kind of dust bunny look. That's a little bit better. Maybe the fall-off was just a little bit too strong. Because again, that's what it looks like. We just do a regular linear thing. That feels just a tad too even. That feels like almost right. Also, why does it... Looks like it gets darker. Or wait, is that a result? I don't know. Like, how do we make smoke that even looks like that look good? I may be getting to the point where start messing this up even more by fiddling with it, so I should probably call it a day. Like, that smoke looks okay. Decent, at least. Even though it is still hitting the border, so I need to fix that again. What else do I need to do? Oh, right, I need to try out scaling them up over time. It doesn't look that bad. Okay, let's try 0.75. Okay, no, okay. Maybe the Dust Bunny look. Here we can barely see the noise influence, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it might be working well in this case. They look like spheres, so maybe I think 0.7 is the way to go. Alright, we're going a bit over time. I will have to call it. But yeah, the regular one, it being, yeah, let's get this in a good state before I pass it on to Gumroad. I feel like it got a little bit worse as I was working on it. But I think the dark mode looks okay. Let's take here, let me save this and take the camera for a spin. Yeah, that looks alright. Good enough for a background asset. But I should potentially make like an actual hair card. Not a hair card, a flipbook card system for it. Could be good. Let's also, okay, so let's finish this up by scaling it over its life. So let's get a named attribute, set it to be life. Map range, so that starts off at 1 and scales up to twice its original. I'll just multiply the random scale. There we go. Like, I didn't really want to scale up the particles over time. Oh wait, I think that's helping quite a bit. Like if we do, no, yeah, it is working. It's helping. Oh, there we go. That's looking significantly better. Because now it actually looks like it's dissipating rather than, There we go. Okay, that is better. Maybe 3's fine. That's why it was missing. Okay, let's put these into frames so that it's a little easier for people to move them around. I could make the input be the active camera node, but something tells me this node is going to be changing. There are plans to change it even more because it's very limited. But for here, it should be fine. I'll think about it. Because I still kind of want this to be compatible with 4.0. Still do. Alright, I could collapse that, but Alright, it's okay. Put that into a frame. Should be good for now. Alright, I really wish I could get the fire part looking good, but smoke plus fire as a card system doesn't seem to be the best idea, at least for now. Like, it's close to looking good, but not quite. So it seems like it's evolving way too quickly. Let me set that to be 60 just to slow it down a little bit more. Yeah, it's so close to being good. So close, but not quite. Green smoke. So close. So close. What if I were to make that a diffuse texture? Oh, and the strength of that. Oh, that's why it was looking different. Okay. Oof, that's a little rough. So I could have that gradient affect the actual smoke gradient in order for it to give it some depth. That would be a better way of doing it. Instead of just being like, hey, we're affecting the strength of it. That's not the best way. No, it's already kind of set to ease. But this makes it a little more art controllable. Okay, the user. And then I'm still very unsure about the fire. Like with that part, it looks less like fire and more like just, I don't know, orange orbs coming from the center. Maybe if it fades fast enough, it's okay. Oh, actually, it's not looking bad. Not looking too bad. I'd say that is acceptable. That is acceptable. I probably should make this into its own separate product, like just one node where you can affect the fire. But hey, it being in just the base particle system is okay. It would be nice just to have a fire asset. Well, that's looking pretty good. And again, I wish we had the pixel depth offset so that we didn't have... It's supposed to be an Eevee Next, but Eevee Next has been delayed so many times that I really don't expect to get any additional features. I just expect it to be a rewrite of the original Eevee with maybe SSGI. I think SSGI is already in it. But yeah, if we look at this, it looks pretty good. Acceptable. I do want to try... I am delaying ending the stream so long when I really can't. I could push it back just a little bit more. Okay, let's have the good settings here, so we can still use the add shader. Should be fine. We can delete that and that, have you be here. And I also want to try having that be a diffuse texture with bump, so diffuse with a bump node, bump. So I can feed that into that into there. Let's give it a shot. Give it a fair shot. What'd I break? What did I break? Are we good now? Okay. We can see that's looking absolutely terrible. And it's slow. Horrendously slow. Ah, Eevee. The Vulcan stuff for Blender / I think it's also for Eevee. It has been delayed as well due to the development freeze and such. I can still see the borders on there, which I'm annoyed by. That gives it a little bit more depth, but I don't think it's not enough. It looks more like a band-aid. Or it makes the card part look much more apparent than this. I could also raise the levels on this. It's all, you know, what the user would think. Oh, wait, why did the cards become so apparent? Okay, okay, maybe I just hit that a little bit. There we go, okay. That's good. Or is it? It's so close to being good, but just a few things really make it difficult. Just that a little bit. Okay, that seems to be alright. Try affecting the distortion a bit more. Nope, that looks interesting, but not great. Noise goes up, noise goes down. Stylized fire. I could try using a Voronoi. Sorry, I keep delaying ending the stream. interesting that normalize is set to 0 when you add in a Voronoi. Interesting. So if I just plug in the color there, or actually no, we don't want that. We want this to be like this. So we can see that gives a very interesting look to the fire. Very cool, very cool. But then it gets to be a little bit too homogeneous when you scale it up. Like that. It's an interesting look. Not a look that you necessarily want, but it's interesting nonetheless. So, okay. One last thing. I know I keep saying this, but... Actually, what if I were to mix the two? Because one looks better than the other. If I were to invert this, we can see we get something like that, which doesn't look great. But the other one, that looks okay. Stylized, but cool, very cool. But yeah, you should use a regular smoke texture if you can. Also, oh wait, I haven't played around with that all too much. No, that doesn't look great. The regular noise, let's plug that into there and see what it looks like. A little too general for my liking. Oh, that popping might be an issue. Well, that's a story for another time. Okay, let's go and try to make a little explosion with this. Let's save this once again. Let's make it so that with a switch node, frames. Let's use a wrapped node, math wrap, equal to 0. That could be an integer. So every 20 frames we'll get a few particles. There we go. So here, let's set it to be like 50. Let's give them a bit more velocity, a bit more vroom. That does not look great. Maybe it just needs more. Maybe it's because the fire is lingering so much. I probably won't save this version, so I'm just going to be experimenting by a little bit. And select that one again, make it so that only appears for a little bit. Here, let's make it so that the fire exists from the beginning. Then a little bit more turbulence would be okay. A little bit more like that. Nope, that's good. How are we on time? Okay. Still have a little bit of time. Alright. That's not great. Let's also add in a little bit of... Oh no, not wind on that side, wind on that side. Set to 500. This is going to be terrible, but... It's really giving that... Like, the noise needs to be very general, or else it'll be giving off that dust bunny look, which we really don't want. Yeah, no, this isn't proper explosion smoke. Just because the segments are so small given the scale of what's happening. Like, if we set that back to there, set this to be like 100 instead. Maybe 0.2. Set that to be like 0.5, set that to be 0.1. Dang. Okay, so the wind is too much as well. So let's set this to be 0.02. 0.05. Maybe I'll make it so that if it's less than, so that will spawn over several frames. Still a little bit unsure as to what's looking really bad about it. Oh well. I'll just go and refresh the file so that we can see the end result before packaging this up and putting it up on Gumroad. Alright. Go, reopens the file. There we go. I'd say that is an acceptable result. Still not great, but I think as good as I'm gonna get for a just general fire effect. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time, and have a good one. This file will be available on Gumroad for free. Alright. See you next time.